We were a bunch of guys thrown together. We weren't regular army. We were thrown together.
When we first went in, people said we wouldn't make it.
I never liked joining anything. I like to be on my own. I mean, I don't want somebody telling me, well, Fred, I like this. I want you to like it too. No.
Guys from other parts of the country who thought we were, called us Broadway Soldiers, that we couldn't fight, but we proved that we could.
I was one of the leaders. Anything that had to be done, I did. I was the first to do certain things. I was not scared of anything, and I didn't care what the consequences were.
We went through hell. We went through fire, illnesses.
If I survived this war, I wanted to do something for the rest of my life that I would enjoy doing.
We're all just average people, and we don't accomplish too much in this world. But I will always look back to the 88th Division in my 1942 to 1945.
We can still march in step the way we did so many years ago when they called us the Broadway Soldiers. There just aren't so many of us left anymore. We're veterans of the 88th Infantry Division. We were the first soldiers drafted during World War II to see combat. Between 1942 and 1944, we fought some of the toughest divisions of the German army in the mountains and towns and valleys of Italy. The Germans didn't call us the Broadway Soldiers. They called us the Blue Devils. Some of us come to Pine Lawn Cemetery every year to mourn our dead. We come to remember the ones who didn't come back. We come to remember the ones who didn't come home. When Morris Schultz reads the names of our dead Blue Devils, we hook up names with faces, faces from 50 years ago. We bring them back in our minds and our hearts. And we remember being inducted at Governor's Island in June of '42. Back then, we were just a bunch of working class guys from New York City. Guys like Charlie Shea, our Congressional Medal of Honor winner. Back then, Charlie was just a skinny red-headed guy who sold peanuts at Yankee Stadium.
Well, as you know, the 88th Division was basically a northeastern division made up of men from the northeast.
We got a great bunch of guys. One thing I like about them, they're not a bunch of drunks. I was supposed to join the American Legion and places like that. I go around, all them guys were womanizers and drunks and everything else. And I kept clear of that. But I bumped into these fellas from the 88th. We have a few cans of beer and that's it. It's an honor to know them kind of men. Half the time they listen to my stories without yelling at me.
By the throat. Actually, I was seeing blue. So I fell back in the water, I picked my rifle, and I smashed his goddamn... I still remember that last thing. I smashed his head in.
Well, I tell you, the 88th was, to me, just a bunch of good guys that became closer than brothers.
The 88th Division was friendship, was people surviving together, working together.
I know that. I'm fine. He's too busy eating, that's why he didn't hear you.
There were many times that we did things for each other without asking, because we were part of the 88th and we were the Blue Devils.
Fred, at the last open house, who got my gift? It was a picture of myself.
It isn't like you meet a friend on the outside and they're friends of yours. This is something that sticks with you.
I think I'd give anything for any one of them, and I think they would have the same feeling towards me.
Most of the young guys in the neighborhood were all full of piss and vinegar, more or less, to say, saying it outright, that everybody wanted to join up. They want to be part of the gang. And if you enlisted, fine. If you were drafted, fine. But everybody went, nobody scored.
I was drafted into the Army on June 1942. I was saying goodbye to my wife. I was behind a pillow crying, and I was looking at her and she was crying. And it was a very sad situation for myself and her because we were just married and we loved one another.
And here we were more or less drawn from a secluded family, mixed in with a bunch of guys. Your privacy was completely taken away from you.
You had to sleep next to a guy that maybe you liked or maybe you didn't like. By the time you got finished your basic training or whatever it is you had, you liked them. We were trained by a bunch of regular Army fellows. And of course, many of us New York wise guys and New England wise guys and all the rest of it didn't make out all that well, because these fellows were trained soldiers and they couldn't see either what use we were going to be to our country or if we'd even make it through the end.
It's not a question of being a wise guy. It's a question you have more street smarts.
'Cause I had never had a gun in my hand in my life. So they gave me a gun and some brief instructions. I took one shot. I kicked up dirt about 3 foot in front of me. Whistles were blown and everything else. He said, better get this fella out. Take the gun away from him.
Prior to going into the Army, you depended on your parents or your friends. Now you had to make your own decisions, right or wrong. And you did. And most of the time, you made the right decisions. Sometimes you made bad ones.
I turned around and cursed at the first cook, and he made me do KP, and I got mad, so I went in, and I seen the labels on all the cans in the pantry. So I tore all the labels off all the cans, put them in my fatigue jacket, moved all the cans around in the pantry, and when the cook went in, he couldn't find what he wanted. And he called the mess sergeant, he blamed it on me. I said, I didn't do anything. The mess sergeant says, don't worry, I know where everything is. And he told the first cook, open this can here is peas. He opened it with strawberries. I changed everything around. For a couple of weeks, the refrigerator was full of food. They didn't know where anything was.
I guess as we neared the end of it, we could see ourselves shaping, coming into shape.
I was lean and mean and a real fighting machine. I looked very deceiving. I'm still the same weight I was as I entered service.
Yeah, I was a sergeant, and these young kids, they used to call me Pop, and they used to annoy the hell out of me. Well, they were only about 18, 19, and I was 23, which was considered pretty old when you look at it. I mean, an infantryman had to be pretty agile, and I used to pride myself in being able to beat any of them in running or doing things, you know. And you got along good with the kids. After a while, they realized I wasn't Pop anymore.
So I stopped fooling around, and I made PFC in 1 month. Next month, I made corporal. Next month, I made buck sergeant.
We really progressed since the day we fell off the train at Camp Gruber.
The first time I realized this was war was when we had shipped from Fort Sam Houston to Hampton Roads, Virginia. And now we got the orders to board the ship. And as we were walking toward the ship, here were the soldiers with guns and machine guns, and we were kind of walking there, fences all around us. And I suddenly realized that this was it.
It took us approximately 13 days to cross. And our first hot meal in Casablanca was, believe it or not, Spam meatballs and spaghetti, and they tasted delicious. And then we took the old 40 and 8 boxcars from Casablanca to Oran, which was a 3-day trip. And it was more or less being like in a prison on wheels. We left from Oran on a ship called a Highland Chieftain.
The sea was very calm, and I thought to myself as we were sailing, I said, my golly, people pay thousands of dollars to take a trip on the Mediterranean. Here was I, courtesy of the Army, heading for Italy.
And we went down to the galley, and as we did, we passed the officers' mess room, and I looked down, I said, I can't believe this. There was beautiful silverware, white tablecloths, glassware, and the guys I were with going to the galley shook our heads and said, well, there's a class distinction.